In this video, we're going to put our new skills together to design a glass engraved plate. We're going to basically be engraving the bottom side of a glass plate, and we have about 6 inches of area in which to work. So I will start by drawing out a 6 inch by 6 inch circle. And of course we're going to be engraving the bottom part of the plate, so that way if you're eating off the top of it you can see the piece underneath, but also you won't get food bits stuck in the tiny engraved lines. And at the very end, we won't do this until the very end, but the last thing that we'll want to do is to flip our image, and that's especially important if we have words in it, because again, if we're viewing the underside of the plate, that means we are looking at the reverse of the engraved image. So if we have text and we want to be able to read it, we need to reverse it. So I have my 6 inch workspace, and I decided I wanted to go with a sort of natural farm to table sort of theme. So I found this image on Creative Commons, and I'm going to start creating shapes off of this because I thought it would look very pretty. So first I can use my pen tool and I'll draw, I really like this one stem here, so I'm going to draw this. Okay, and then I'm going to draw a couple little circles, but instead of actually making a whole bunch of circles myself, I will make one circle and make sure that that looks like the way I want it to. So I'll take off the stroke and I'll give it a fill. Since we're doing engraving on this glass, you can't actually cut glass on the laser cutter. What I want to do instead is just make sure that everything at the end has a fill and doesn't have any strokes. So we'll actually use a new tool here with about the size I want it to be, maybe a tiny bit smaller. And we'll go over to our spray objects tool. So I'm going to allow there to be some changing in scale. I'm going to change the width a little bit and make the amount a little smaller. I don't need nearly that many. And watch this. Oh, that's maybe a little too wide. So let's change the width down to be really tight. There we go. Maybe that's a little too much. This allows us to create a fair amount of randomness and look natural. Well, let's change that a little. While still being in the area that we want it to be. It would take me forever to draw out all of those little baubles, but using this tool I can make them fairly quickly and get the same kind of idea. I want to make sure that the tips are covered, but other than that, making sure that they land in one place or another is not something I'm too concerned about. Okay, I'm going to change the opacity of our background drawing, which I can do down here, and just so that way I can get a better sense of what's going on with our drawing. And I'm going to make this main one a little bit thicker first. Too thick. 0.5 should be, oops, that's much too thick. There we go, 0.3. That looks pretty natural. So now I can go ahead and turn all of these strokes into paths. There we go. And so I'll do that with a bunch of other natural elements on here, do the same sort of idea, and I'll catch up with you once I've done that. As you can see, I made a few more wild grasses and other natural shapes and added them to the area inside my circle using our spray tool. And so it looks like a nice little composed wild grasses scene. But as you can see, of course, quite a few of these are coming out of my circle, and I really only want to etch things inside this red circle I have here. So I could union all these objects together, but that would take approximately forever. So instead, I am going to select everything, and if I hold down Shift, I can get rid of the circle I accidentally selected, and do my favorite little sneaky shortcut tool, which is make a bitmap copy. Because this is really complicated, and unioning all of that would take just way too long. So I'll delete the original. Oops. Except for my starter circle, which doesn't seem to want to be selected. There we go. Delete all that, and then I will turn this back into a vector image by doing trace bitmap. I'll double check that looks good based on my brightness cutoff, and I'll remove the background so there's just one less step of things to do. I will delete the one behind, and I have all the same pieces I had before, except now they are one object without having to union it. I'll place it where I wanted it in my circle. I'll actually make it a little bit smaller. And I'll make a copy of my circle just that way I don't lose it, and I will only select the area inside of my circle where there's overlap. So I have both objects selected, and I will do path, intersection. Whoa, that looks pretty cool. But right now, of course, it has a stroke to it, and we don't want any strokes on our engraved plate. So I'll give it a fill, and it's starting to look pretty snazzy as a plate design. And I'm going to add some text here. So again, I'll make a copy of my circle, and I'll actually do an edit duplicate, so that way I don't lose the original, and my new one stays exactly where I really would like it to be. And I'm going to add some text. And since these are wild grasses in this photo, and I have been learning a little bit more recently about harvesting wild plants, I'm going to make a plate that I can use specifically for when I have guests over and am serving something that I harvested from the wild. So I'm going to say eat wild. And I want this to be a little bit bigger and a little bit more of a wild looking kind of font. So let's scroll through a whole bunch to see what one might work well. If that one comes in a, well, I guess that's a bit, I guess that's enough bold. We'll just make it bigger. So I'll duplicate our interior circle, and then if I hold down Shift and Control, I can have the new circle that I've made be on center with the original circle. Okay, so now I'll do Shift, Select, Select, go to Text, put on Path, and then I will rotate the text so that way it is where I want it to be. That looks pretty good. Okay, we're going to turn that into an invisible stroke. so that way it's not trying to cut through the glass of our plate. And I feel like it needs something more over here. There we go. We'll move our image over to the side. And again, we want to get rid of the stroke. Doesn't look quite as cool as I thought it would. Maybe we can put it in the middle. Aha. These little crosshairs actually determine what the object is rotating around. So for the most part, it's in the center of your object. Sometimes it decides to move, which can make things quite tricky to rotate. Almost there. I think this would have looked better as a butterfly or something like that, but for this little test, this is fine. Okay, so what did we forget? Well, we forgot to turn our text into a path, so we'll do path, object path, and then I'm going to put all of these together. So the last thing that we'll do is turn this into a bitmap again. This allows us to etch out everything all at once. Otherwise, again, the laser cutter will say, oh, let's etch out this little shape, and then let's etch out the letters, and then we'll etch out all of the grasses. It's just much more efficient if we can etch the whole thing at once. So we'll go to Edit, make bitmap copy, delete the original. Again, bitmap is fine, but we can double check that this has no stroke and that it only has a fill. We could change this to be any color we want. It really doesn't matter. Anything that's a single color filled in will cut out like a single setting that you get to choose. So now, oh, and the very last thing we want to do is to reverse our image, because again, we are going to be etching this onto the bottom of a clear plate. And so then when we flip our plate over, we'll be able to see our little message that says "Eat Wild," and it won't be backwards. And that's how you can make a plate.